In this lesson, we'll look at yet another category of evidence collected by Charles Darwin to argue in favor of species change. We'll call it Exhibit D, classification or groupishness. Now, you may be familiar with the way biologists classify organisms, the kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species system. There is order in this classification of species. What we're doing here with this system is basically putting different species into groups based on shared characteristics. Now, at the kingdom level, this is the largest grouping then of the animals, and so there's lots of species in that grouping, and they only have a few shared characteristics. So this would be the set of characteristics that all animals have. But as you go to the smaller and smaller groupings, then you have fewer species, but the species that are in the group have more and more shared traits, until you get down to even really small groups that consisting of only a few species, but they share lots and lots of traits. Now, Darwin's going to ask the question, well, why is it that we can do this? Why can we classify species in this way, based on shared similarities? Why are some species really similar to others and yet really different from yet other species? Of course, the Christian thinkers would resort to sort of this is a reflection of God's design, but Darwin is seeking a natural explanation for our ability to classify species based on these shared characteristics. And here's what he's going to do. He's going to say that the ability to classify is a result of an evolutionary history. And again, we can capture that with evolutionary trees. The trees show the relationships of current species to each other. And species share common ancestors at different times in the past. In this example, we'll be looking at the relationship between the wolves and the leopards and the domestic cats. And here you see the evolutionary tree. Now, it's pretty evident that the leopard and the domestic cat are more similar to each other than either is to the wolf. So for Darwin, he wants to try to explain this. Why is it that the leopard and the domestic cat share more characteristics than either do with the wolf? Well, here's Darwin's move. That the leopard and the domestic cat are more similar. They share more traits because they inherited them from a recent common ancestor. And because the ancestor was recent, there hasn't been much time for differences to evolve in the separate lineages here. That's why they're really similar. By contrast, the wolf and the leopard are more different because their ancestor was farther back in time. They have fewer shared traits because there was more time for evolution to equip the species with different adaptations. And so we get more differences. They share fewer traits. Now, in this diagram, we're going to make a direct connection between the classification system, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species, and an evolutionary process captured in an evolutionary tree. So again, Darwin is kind of saying that if species have a lot of shared characteristics like wolves and dogs, it's because they had a recent common ancestor. So again, remember, in the smallest groupings, there are fewer species there, but they share lots of characteristics. Why is that? Because they had a recent common ancestor. But as you go to the larger and larger groupings, there are more and more species in the category, but they share fewer and fewer traits. Why would that be? Because the common ancestor was farther back in time, and there was more time for the different lineages to evolve lots of different adaptations. So Darwin is claiming that the classification system, or the ability to classify species based on similarities, follows from this evolutionary history. In other words, the process of evolution explains why we can classify species based on these similarities. It has to do with the time since the common ancestor.